Hello everyone, welcome to my Solfachord guide, combo, and deck profile video. I'm going to be showing off various different ways to use the new Solfachord cards. I'm going to be showing off what the new cards do, and different deck lists for different versions of the deck. So this is the pure version of the deck, which I'll be using to show off the basics of what this deck can do, and then we'll get into more of the more complex versions of the deck later. So first off, I'm going to talk about the new support for the deck, because it completely changes how this deck plays. We got 3 new cards in Solfachord Solfegia, Solfachord Primoria, and Solfachord Happiness. I'm going to start with what I think is the most important card first, Solfachord Happiness, which is the new spell card. It allows you to activate one of its effects per turn, or one of each of its effects per turn, so you can use each of its 3 effects once per turn, which does come up because we're going to be recycling this card in our combos and then using its other effects after we use its first effect, which is allowing you to discard a card and then add 2 Solfachord Pendulums with different scales from your deck to your hand, and then you can special summon Solfachord Pendulum monsters from your hand up to the number of monsters your opponent controls plus 1. So what that means is, even if your opponent has an empty board, you can still special summon at least 1 Solfachord monster. So what this effectively reads is, going first, you get to add 2 Solfachards and then summon one of them from your hand. Going second, it means you get to add 2 Solfachards to your hand and then summon as many as you want from your hand, basically, which is insane. And that's just one of its 3 effects. The next of its effects is, during your main phase, you can conduct 1 Pendulum Summon of a Solfachord Monsters in addition to your Pendulum Summon. So you just get an additional Pen Summon for as many Solfachards as you'd like. And then its third effect, which doesn't really come up because you don't really want to take out your scales, is you can special summon 2 Solfachord cards from your pen scales, which is fine. It doesn't really ever come up because emptying your scales kind of feels really bad. But these first 2 effects are super powerful. The extra pen summon effect allows you to extend way farther than most pendulum decks are allowed. And the first effect is an insane tool to get your play started. It is the strongest effect in the deck, and kind of what your game plan is focused around is getting that effect to resolve. Then we'll go on to what I think is the next most important card, and which is now the deck's most powerful starter, besides Happiness, I suppose, which is Solfachord Primoria. So Primoria has its scale effect, which when you pendulum summon a monster, allows you to target a Solfachord in your pen scale and return to the hand. You'll usually be bouncing this back to your hand, and notably, that is not once per turn, so you can do that every time you pendulum summon, and then bounce it back, and then rescale it as needed. And then its monster effects are, while you have Solfachord cards with even and odd scales in your pen zone, your activated Solfachord cards and effects can't be negated. This is nice. It doesn't really come up all that much, but it is an okay effect to have. And then, more importantly, if this card is normal or special summon, you can add a Solfachord card from your deck to your hand. This is huge because this allows you to add your Solfachord Primoria or one of your other Solfachord monsters if you happen to already have Solfachord Happiness in hand or you started with it. Then it has one more effect, which does matter, which is if you link summon a Solfachord monster, you can add a Solfachord card from your grave or extra deck to your hand. So this is really important because this is how we're going to be recycling our Solfachord Happiness. We'll link summon and then use this and then add this back to our hand, and then we can conduct our second Pendulum Summon. And then the last card, which is the least important of the 3 cards, but is still important enough, Solfachord Solfegia. So first off, its scale effect, which is probably the most important of its effects, is that when a monster effect activated by your opponent on the field resolves, if you control a Grand Solfachord monster, which is the Link monsters, you can negate that effect and destroy this card. So we have a negate on resolution Ryzeal style, which is really nice to have. It does kind of conflict a little bit with the Link monster, and for a reason I'll get into later, but this is still a really strong effect to have, and if you can set it up properly, this gives you a really strong layered setup. Then its monster effects is, if you control no monsters or all monsters you control are Solfachards, you can summon this monster from your hand. And then during the main phase, you can summon a Solfachord monster from your hand, or by tributing this card at activation, you can special summon that monster from your grave or face up extra instead. So this card's so its monster effects are all right. Having an extender is obviously quite nice. If your Happiness gets negated. That effect becomes a lot more important because just having the extra extender can get you into Beyond the Pendulum. It can get you just wherever you need to get to. Also, being able to just summon a monster from hand for free is quite nice. It's not bad at all. And hypothetically, being able to bring back the Kulia or just any other card that might matter is also nice. Like, this card just has a bunch of effects that are really nice to have. None of them are super broken, but it is a good card. More importantly, by the way, something I should mention about Solfachia and Primoria is that they are incredible scales. Solfachord desperately needed both a scale 0 and a scale 9 because they have level 8s and level 1s in their deck, and before they just couldn't pen summon them in Engine, which sucked. Now you can do it super efficiently, and this is an odd and an even scale, which matters a lot for Solfachord's main gimmick, which is that it matters if you have odd and even scales. You might not be able to tell that from these new cards, but yes, that is the supposed to be gimmick of the deck. It's a lot less important now, but there are cards where it comes up. Then we'll talk about the 4 other Solfachord cards we run. First off is the Solfachord Classic Boss Monster. We now have a better boss monster, but this is the old boss monster, which is Do Solfachord Kulia. Its scale effect, and it shares this scale effect, I believe, with all odd-scaled Solfachord pens, which is your opponent cannot activate a spell, trap, or monster effect when your Solfachord Pendulum monster is Pendulum summoned. So this means your opponent couldn't use something like a Bottomless Trap Hole, or just cards that would trigger on a special summon when you Pendulum summon a Solfachord. And then its monster effects, which is the more important part of the card, is that you can special summon this card by attributing to Pendulum monsters. Ideally, we are never doing that. I hope you never have to summon this card that way, because it feels really bad. The more important effects is that you can target a face-up card your opponent controls, or 2 if you have an odd Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, and then negate those effects until the end of the opponent's turn. That's super nice for breaking boards, negating something like the Yummy field spell, or like the Vanquish Soul field spell, or just monsters your opponent controls to force interaction, is really nice. It's just a good way to push into boards, especially since you can summon this for free off of your Solfachord Happiness. And then its other effect is when a monster effect on the field is activated with an equal or lower attack in the highest scale in your Pendulum Zone times 300. So in the highest scale case, 2700, we can destroy that monster. So basically, it's like a bad Ghost Ogre, but it's fine, and you will have this as part of your end board in a lot of your different setups. So it's important to know that effect because it is a part of your end board a lot of the time. Next is one of our most important cards for comboing off, which is Soul Solfachord Gracia. It has your opponent cannot activate spell, trap, or monster effects when your Solfachord monster is Pendulum summoned. Oh, maybe they all have that. No, some of them do. I don't know what the difference is, but some of them have the opponent can activate on Pendulum Summon or another effect, which we'll get into with Cutia. Anyway, while you have an even Pendulum scale in your Pendulum Zone, if your Solfachord Pendulum monsters attack, your opponent cannot activate monster effects until the end of the damage step. That's not like a crazy effect, but it can come up in trying to run over monsters that have some kind of dumb protection effect or some kind of attack gain effect or something. If you're just trying to play around some very annoying stuff, this can help with that. And then if this card is normal or special summon, you can add a Solfachord spell or trap from your deck to your hand. This is really nice, as this is part of our combos, which we'll search our other Solfachord spell, which we'll get into later, which is really nice. This can also be used hypothetically, where if you open like Solfachia plus Gracia, you can summon Solfachia and then use its effect to summon Gracia and then search Happiness, and then Happiness, and like that's full combo. So Gracia can hypothetically be used as like a starter if you need to do like a 2-card combo line. It's not great, but it does get you there. Next is the Do Solfachord Cutia. This one has the pen skill effect of Pendulum summons of your Solfachord pens cannot be negated. This one's a lot more useful in my opinion because it means your opponent can't like solemn your Pendulum summon or like just negate it with various things. There are a lot of effects that are really frustrating because they can negate your Pendulum summon, and this stops that, which is nice. Unfortunately, this card is not going to be in your scale very often because normally we're using this to combo off. Wish we had a Solfachord that like did work like that, but it's not really worth playing any of the other Solfachords for because I will tell you right now, they are not very good. We are playing all of the good ones. While you have an even Pendulum scale in your Pendulum Zone, Solfachord Pendulums you control gain attack equal to their scale times 100. Not a crazy effect or anything, but it is nice to have like a small boost for all your Solfachords. And then on normal or special, you can add a Solfachord Pendulum from your deck to your hand. That is really the only thing we care about with this card. On summon, search as a Solfachord, which is important for various combos, which we will get into when we show off the combos. Then the last Solfachord card that we haven't gone over, for the main deck anyway, is Solfachord Elegance. So this has 3 effects, but you can only activate 1 of this card per turn. So it's similar to Solfachord Happiness, but it's a little more balanced, if you would say. The 3 effects are: place a Solfachord Pendulum from your deck into the pen scale, which is fine and solid. However, we're usually going to be using the second effect of this card, which is add a Solfachord Pendulum from your hand to the extra deck, then place 2 Solfachord Pens, 1 odd and 1 even, from your deck into the pen scales. So, what usually we'll be doing is we'll be using Primoria to search Happiness. Happiness will search Gracia and Cutia. We'll then special the Gracia, and then Gracia will search Elegance, and then we'll have Elegance put Cutia into the extra deck to place 2 scales from our deck to the field, and then we can link into Beyond the Pendulum and just go off from there. And then the last effect, which comes up sometimes, but not a lot, is that you can add 2 cards, 1 odd and 1 even scale from your Pendulum Zones to your extra deck, and then if you do, draw 2 cards, which is cute and could come up, but doesn't most of the time. Next, I'll go into the extra deck monsters for this. We have 2, and I'm going to be real, I'm not even going to read the effects of one of them because they just don't come up. They can come up if you really want them to, but I'm going to be honest, they don't really come up unless you want them to come up. So the more important monster is Grand Solfachord Kulia, which takes 2 monsters, including a pendulum, so it's really easy to make. It's a Link 3, and it gains the following, and has the following effects. Gains 100 attack for each pendulum monster in your extra deck, so this card can get to a decent size. Just getting it over to like 3100 is really nice because it beats over most relevant cards, and in general, this is just a really big Link 3. The activated effects of pendulum monsters this card points to cannot be negated. In this deck, this doesn't come up very much. There are some interesting texts people used to use where they would go like, use the Zark trap to summon Zark, and then effects can be negated, and you nuke your opponent's board, which is a really cute play, but it's kind of too inconsistent to realistically set up. But there's some cute stuff you can do with this. But in general, that effect isn't super important unless your opponent's playing really badly. But anyway, its more important effect is, once per turn when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can special summon a Solfachord with an odd pendulum scale from your scale to a zone this card points to, and then if you do, negate that effect, then you can add a Solfachord Pendulum with an even scale from your deck to your extra deck. So basically, TLDR, this is a negate by summoning an odd-scaled Solfachord to your field. You have 2 targets for this. You have Solfachord Solfegia and Solfachord Kulia. So what you typically want to be doing is you want to be ending on Kulia in scale, plus Solfegia in scale, plus Kulia on field. So Kulia can summon the non-link Kulia, which can get its pop online, along with you'll have your negate, and then you'll still have your Solfegia in the scale to do a negate on resolution. So that's like 3 interruptions right there just by having these 2 cards in scale, plus your Solfachord, plus your Grand Solfachord Kulia. So that's a lot to work with just in engine already, going with the fact that we can then make a ton of generic link stuff with all the other bodies we get. So really, really nice stuff right there. And kind of the bread and butter of what this deck does do on its turn 1. Then we have Grand Solfachord Musicaea, and I'm going to be real, it's just a Link to Solfachord monster that can be made with 2 Pendulum monsters. That's all that matters. That's the only thing that matters with this card. Sometimes you just need to be able to make a Link to Solfachord to trigger Primoria's effect. Specifically in a combo where we are fairy locked, that is super important. Otherwise, this card does not matter. There is like an effect that could come up, which is when you pendulum summon a Solfachord, you can target one of them and then add a Solfachord from your deck to your hand whose level equals the scale of that monster. Hypothetically, that could come up, but like, it's not gonna if you don't want it to. It hasn't come up for me at all in testing, but hypothetically it could. Then I'll get into our other main deck engine options, or other main deck engine cards, which these are both starters in 3 Diviner the Herald and 1 Trios Hierarchia. Diviner can just send a fairy from deck to grave, so your play is send Trios, tribute Diviner, and then Diviner, when tributed, can summon a level 2 or lower fairy from deck, so you'll summon your Solfachord Primoria. And then that's full combo. So you get Primoria plus a free body on the board, which is really nice. And then you have 3 Dawn Angel Camby. And this is a newer card, so I'll actually go over what this one does. If you control no monsters or all monsters you control are fairies, you can summon this monster from your hand. And then you contribute any number of fairies, including this card, to summon a fairy monster from your deck whose levels equal the level that monster had on the field. However, you cannot special summon the turn you use this effect except fairies. So basically what this is an extender and a free summon from deck for your Solfachord Primoria, since this is a level 1. So this is another 1-card starter. However, we have to do kind of a wonky line for our end board that is a little weaker than our standard end board, but actually isn't too bad. It's shockingly good considering we can't make Beyond the Pendulum or anything. And I will show off that combo at the end of the video, along with all the other combos, since I do think it is very important to know and isn't immediately obvious what you're supposed to do. Then we get 20 non-engine in this version of the deck, which is crazy. I'm not going to go over why we're on these non-engine. I just like these non-engine right now for this format, but this could totally change. It just depends on your personal preference. All that matters is you get 20 of it, which is insane. Then for our extra deck, we have our Super Poly targets, Typhon, Underworld Goddess for outing stuff like the Lunalite Liger Dancer and all that. Avermax, just because it is a card you can make that is good. I will say this extra deck is really not tight, so there's all kinds of interesting stuff you could try and throw in here. Kind of the world's up to your oyster. I'd say the only mandatory stuff in here is Access Code, Kulia, Exceed, Musicaea, SP, Beyond, IP, and Herald. The rest of it is all free and up to you. But anyway, speaking of which, we then have Access Code, who's important for going second in OTKing. We have 2 Kulia. I just like having the second one for the grind game. We have Exceed the Pendulum, who is important for getting into Access Code. He's not super important for setting up any of the combos in this version of the deck, but that's fine because you want to be able to use it on turn 3 to make Access Code and kill your opponent. Then you have the 1 Musicaea, the 1 SP Little Knight for making with IP, and because it's just a really good card. 1 Condemned Dark Lord for the life point gain effect, if you know, you know. Beyond the Pendulum, because this card is super important for combos. In fact, I think there's a good argument that you actually run 2 of this, since it's not once per turn, so you can just make a second one, and then if your opponent imperms the first, and just get another search. You could also, hypothetically, I don't know why you would ever do this, but you could, in theory, make a second Beyond the Pendulum after you gain your second Pendulum summon, and then search again. I don't know what you're going to do with that search, but you sure can do that. 1 IP Masquerena, which is a common part of our end board, and 1 Herald of Mirage Lights, which is a common part of our end board, and important because of the Fairy Lock on Camby. This is usually part of that end board specifically. I'm not going to get into the combos until the end of the video. I'm just going to let those play out and let you guys see what does what. So I'm actually just going to move on to the next build of the deck, which is going to be Solfachord Fiendsmith. So this is kind of the next step up on what I would say these Solfachord building blocks go up to. I will say every build of Solfachord following Pure is going to have a less non-engine, but will have a higher ceiling. Actually, I'm going to go back to Pure real quick and talk about my pros and cons for it. So the pros for this build of the deck is that you have so much non-engine. 20 non-engine is crazy good, especially for a Pendulum deck. Along with the fact that you do have like a pretty respectable amount of starters. You've got 12, which is not bad. It's not insane or anything, but it's like fine. And then you also have a pretty decent combo. So I will say the end board for this deck ends on 6 Interruptions with a 1-card Primoria combo. It ends on, I believe, 5? Let me think real quick. Sorry, 4. You end on 4 Interruptions for a 1-card Camby combo. So you have 4 to 6 Interruptions typically on your end board. Which isn't a lot and might not be enough against the current decks of the format. So honestly, I know I'm on breakers in this list, but it's very possible that it is more correct to run 20 hand traps so that you can back up that end board with hand traps. If this is the build you want to go for. This is also going to be probably the most budget of all the builds because it's not on any expensive other engines. This is just Solfachord, baby. There are some other Solfachord cards you can hypothetically run that I am not playing. There is some combos you can do that involve going through Solfachord Fancia, Solfachord Dreamia, and Solfachord Symphony. And basically, the idea is you're going to go through Fancia to get another Solfachord in your extra deck, and you're going to end up with 5 Solfachords in your extra deck with different scales, so that you can use, with different names, so that you can use Solfachord Symphony on your opponent's turn, which can, if you have 5 or more differently named Solfachords in your extra deck, can destroy a card your opponent controls. Then, if you have an odd scale in your pen zone, which you should, you can then draw a card. So that's really nice. The problem is that it's a lot of hoops to jump through to get to this card and get it all set up. And I just don't think it's worth it. I think you're better off just ending on like a Kulia, an IP, and a Herald of Mirage Lights versus doing all of that. So yeah, just easier, simpler things you can do. The other thing I'm not a huge fan of on this deck's setup is that the end board isn't very layered. Kulia is... a lot of your powers concentrate in Kulia. The only layering on your end board is through Solfegia, which you will have live, so your opponent will have to deal with a monster negate on resolution, and again, is the reason this should probably be a hand trap deck. I think board breakers are probably wrong, and realistically, I would not play board breakers for this. I was just kind of slotting in what I liked as non-engine, but thinking about it more, yeah, this should probably be entirely hand traps. Anyway, that's what I think about the pure version. Now on to the Fiendsmith version. The whole thesis behind the Fiendsmith version is that instead of using your extra bodies for, Herald of Mirage Lights and IP, you're using them for Fiendsmith stuff, which includes going Moon into Requiem, Requiem into Lacrima, Lacrima Sun Engraver, and then climbing into your Caesar, which is 2 interruptions, plus we're on the Fiendsmith in Paradise, so the Lacrima plus Requiem Engrave can send this. So it's 3 interruptions total out of just 2 bodies, which is really, really powerful. It also gives us better OTK options because of Desiree, because you can go sequence into Desiree and then into Agnumde, and then Agnumde bring back Desiree for a huge beater that negates a bunch of times, and we can very easily make a Bawaku in this deck, which can bring back the Desiree and do all kinds of stuff. Just in general, a better grind game and a better ability to... it just does more with less, right? This build can just do a lot more with less. The other cool thing about this build is that it plays by far the best into Droll, because if you have 2 leftover bodies on board, you can just turn them into Fiendsmith combo. So you're a lot less scared of Droll in this build, since you can always back up by making Caesar and ending on Paradise. You always have like 3 interruptions to just back your board up. You have about 17 non-engine in this build, which is definitely less than the last, but not by much. So you still have a ton of non-engine in this list. In general, I like this list. I think it's very solid. I think Pure... I'm going to rank how I feel about them. I think Pure is probably my 3rd favorite of the lists, whereas this is my 2nd, I think. I'm a big fan of the Fiendsmith cards and Pendulum decks. I think they give you a lot more flexibility. It does take up a lot of the extra, but if I'm being honest, a lot of your extra deck in the last list was just not being used anyway most of the time, so this makes a much better use of it. The one thing that does suck is we did lose Camby as an option, which feels bad because we didn't really go up on Solfachord starters. So that feels kind of bad, and that we do have Fiendsmith starters, but we have a lot less in terms of Solfachord starters. So our better starters in terms of interruptions are just lost. But to be fair, 1 Engraver is like a Caesar, which is almost the same amount of interruptions as our 1-card Camby combo. So it's not like a huge difference. I think there's still an argument you play this version of the deck as a hand trap build, but I feel a little more comfortable playing this as a board breaker build. Anyway, the 1-card Primoria, or the 1.5 card Primoria combo, ends on about 8 interruptions, because you're going to be ending on the standard Kulia setup with Do Solfachord Kulia in the scale, and Solfegia in the scale as well, along with the Grand Solfachord Kulia on field. Plus, you're going to have the Caesar on board with the Lacrima and Requiem Engraved to send Paradise, and you'll have an IP on board to go into SP. So it's about 8 interruptions. Really, really strong stuff. In most of the end boards we're going to be getting into end on 8 interruptions. There is 1 end board, maybe 2 actually, that end on a little more than that. but for the most part, 8 is like the standard for hybrid builds of this deck in terms of end boards. Next up, we have the Solfachord Canine deck. This one I really like. This is probably my favorite of the four I'm going to show off, and it's just because I really like the Canine cards. And this one gets to have maybe not the most starters necessarily in terms of one-card starters, but the most starters and extenders in my opinion. So this list uses the fact that Solfachord Gracia is a starter for this deck as a level 5 monster that you can reveal with Jokel. So what your typical play is going to be is Jokel reveal Gracia, summon both Gracia Search Happiness and then Jokel Search Lantern, and now you just play through everything. They could imperm Gracia, but now you do full Canine combo, and that feels terrible for your opponent. And doesn't use your normal summon, so if you just already have Happiness or Primoria or even Cutia, you can just keep extending further and further anyway. Really, really scary combo that you can pull off, and it works a lot of the same way that Christian Canine does, only in this build, instead of the Canine stuff bridging you to your other engine, this engine bridges to Canine, and then Canine cannot bridge to our other engine, which is the one big downside of this deck, is that if you see just Canine cards, it does not get you to Solfachord. So you do really want to be seeing, like, Gracia or Primoria or Happiness or even just Cutia, because Cutia also gets you there since it can search Gracia, which is an argument to maybe bump Cutia up more, but this version has the least amount of non-engine, I believe, and only 13. That being said, you could argue 14 because Azuna's a non-engine card pretty much. But yeah, this is like a really solid combo deck version, or more combo heavy version of the deck. As you can see, we have cards like Firewall, Dragon, Singularity in the extra deck, which our standard Primoria combo does go through. Our standard end board for this version of the deck, with just one Primoria, is going to be Singularity, Firewall, Dragon, the Kulia setup. However, we won't be able to set up the Kulia, the main deck Kulia in the scale, so we're just going to have the Kulia Link Monster with just Solfachia in the scale, tragically. So only one interruption there. But it's made up for by the a million other interruptions we're going to have set up. So we're going to have Singularity, Firewall, Kulia Link, IP on board, V-Linked, by the way, so your opponent won't be able to Link Summon, which is broken against a ton of decks right now, Malice and Yummy specifically. Along with Ripper and the Quick Play spell set up, so you're going to be able to go Quick Play, pop an opponent's monster, tag out into either Canine Jax, which is a pop-on summon, or when your opponent activates a monster effect in the hand, it's a pop, or you can tag out into X-Werewolf, which is a hand rip when your opponent activates a card or effect. I guess I could also go over some other new cards in this, which is Canine 04 Noroi, which is just a normal summon that summons a non-machine Canine from deck, and then you can send a face of Canine control to the grave to look at your opponent's hand. So this is just a one-card starter for Canine, meaning that our Case of Canine is a one-card starter. So this deck does have about 13 one-card starters in it, with 1 Noroi, 3 Case, 3 Happiness, and, oh, sorry, I'm lying, 10 one-card starters in it, because we're not on Diviner. You could also play Diviner in this list if you really wanted. This list has a lot of options in it, which is really nice. After that, we then have... I will also say the Jokel plus Gracia two-card combo is also really powerful, and I will be showing that off at the end of the video as well. Jokel revealing Gracia ends you on a board of... the powerful Solfachord setup with the main deck Kulia end scale, Solfachia end scale, and Kulia on board. Plus, you're going to have Ripper with the Quick Play Canine and the Azuna in hand. So you're going to have 4 interruptions from your Canine engine and 3 from your Solfachord engine. And you're going to have a Firewall Dragon and an IP Masquerena on board. So you have a bounce from Firewall and then a IP tag and SP, which is 2 more interruptions. So it's 10 interruptions. So it is technically more, although you do lose the V-Link and the Singularity on board. But I think you'd more than make up for it, to be honest. What's also nice is that board is a little more layered than the standard board with just Primoria as well. I did not mean to do that, but yeah. Anyway, after that is the last version of the deck I want to show off, which is Solfachord Yummy. So this is more showing off how Solfachord can be used as an engine rather than as the core of a deck. So in this version of the deck, it's actually more of a Yummy deck than it is a Solfachord deck. As you can see, Yummy massively overtakes this deck. But what's really cool about the Solfachord cards is they don't conflict with a lot of what Yummy wants to do. And that is, specifically, it doesn't conflict with one of Yummy's coolest non-engine abilities, which is being able to play Songs of the Dominators and Dominus Purge. Since the Solfachord engine you play in this deck is only the Earth Monster Primoria, the Earth Monster Cutia, and the Light Monster Solfegia, along with the Light Monster Coolia in the extra deck. The only card it conflicts with is Beyond the Pendulum, which is a Dark Monster. But you can do a lot even without Beyond the Pendulum in this version of the deck, such as Still Bridge into Yummy, because guess what? Primoria and Cutia are both level 1s, which means all you have to do is get both of these onto the board, turn one of them into Anima, and then that's full Yummy combo. So these are starters. Their Happiness is a really powerful extender. Solfegia is not a half-bad extender. It's also level 2, which you can do stuff with Herald with. And in general, it sets up a really scary end board. One Primoria allows you to set up a board of Coolia Link plus 2 Solfegias in the scale, so you have 1 to summon with the Coolia and then 1 to use its negate effect. And then you'll have full Yummy combo. Herald, your Yummy names on board, plus a Synchro on board, the works. So that's, I think, like 5 or 6 interruptions just off of that. We're not on the field spell, so it is 1 less, but I'm going to be real. I don't think you need it. I think it's fine. Basically, this is very similar to how people play Primite Yummy, which is just another normal summon engine that can be turned into a Link 1 that is just really powerful. Only I'd argue this is way stronger than a normal summon Primite Aether Barrel, because instead of getting a Drill Beam, which is 1 interruption, you're getting an Omni plus a negate on resolution, so you're getting 2 negates out of it, plus going full combo. Aether Barrel cannot do all of that, unlike the Solfachord stuff. There's also a world where you can even set up like an IP Masquerena or whatever else, where I just realized we're not on IP Masquerena, but you could hypothetically play IP Masquerena. But yeah, this build of the deck I really like as well. This is probably my least favorite, just because it's the least Solfachord heavy of any of them, and I do like this archetype. So yeah, my favorite is Canine, and my second favorite is Fiendsmith, and my third favorite is Pure. But yeah, those are all the versions of the deck, and then I'm going to have the videos of all the combos after this. So I hope you all enjoy that. Anyway, this is going to be the end of the talking section. I hope you all enjoyed. I am going to try to make more of these simulator videos. Tell me if you liked how this is formatted, if you would prefer like commentary over the videos or not. Whatever. I'm going to be signing off. Goodbye.